Ecclesiastes this evening. Let's pray. Father, thank you for an opportunity to gather and just to get into your word. I pray that you would just speak to us tonight, Lord, as we start this new book tonight. I pray that you would open our hearts and our minds, Lord, that you would fill us with your Holy Spirit, Lord, that you would just be speaking to us, Lord, through this book that is just powerful and just so different than the other books in the Bible. I just pray that you would just help us to grow in our understanding of who you are, Lord, and the way the world is. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So you might have got an email, so I told Lacey, it's kind of funny, this is just the way, this is how crazy things are. I told Lacey, I'm pretty sure I told Lacey, send out an email and tell them we're going to be starting Lamentations. I don't know how I got Ecclesiastes and Lamentations mixed up, but I told her that, and I think she put Leviticus. I was like, I said, did you put Lamentations? She's like, no, I put Leviticus. I said Lamentations, but I meant Ecclesiastes. Anyway, that just shows you how my day is going. I don't know. I'm a little off today, so I apologize in advance. But Ecclesiastes, and message is titled, What's the Point? And you're probably going to be asking that as we get into this message. What's your point? But that's the title of the message, and that's kind of the theme of this. And I don't know if you've ever felt that way. Maybe it was a job that you had. Maybe it was a situation in life. Maybe you were just in school as a kid, and you're like, what's the point of this? And we ask that throughout life. We work and work and work and try to make it to retirement, and then you get to retirement, like, what's the point of that? And that's the way that life can be. I remember even just as young as just a small child, just wanting things. I remember sometimes getting them. I remember when I was probably 4. I don't know what it was. I guess probably Buddy Holly, because my dad he had stacks and stacks of records, and I loved Buddy Holly, and I wanted to play a guitar. I wanted a guitar. And I remember wanting the guitar. My dad bought me a guitar. In fact, I just passed that. It's a little Martin, tiny Martin. I just passed it on to my son. But I wanted that forever, and I never really learned to play it. But I wanted a guitar, and I remember wanting a motorcycle. And I remember getting older and wanting a girlfriend. And I remember getting older and wanting a car. And I achieved all of those things in life. As time went on, I eventually got all of those things. And what's interesting is the desire to have was almost greater. The anticipation of wanting, the excitement of it was even greater than actually getting the thing. In fact, it builds so much that when you finally get what you want, you end up kind of feeling depressed about it. I don't know if you've ever felt that. The Chinese have a proverb that says this: may you get what you want, and may you live in interesting times. It's actually a curse. And to live in interesting times to get what you want is actually a curse. And that's kind of what this chapter is about, what this book is about. It's actually what's the point? That's the question that we're asking tonight. And so in verse 1, it says, the words of the preacher, and that's where we get our word Ecclesiastes, mean the one who proclaims to the gathering, the ecclesia is church, of course, but the words of the preacher, the son of David, the king in Jerusalem. And so we know immediately as we look at this that this is written by Solomon. And you can read volumes and volumes of opinions on this and other people saying, well, this wasn't Solomon for this reason or that reason. But if you go to verse 12, that's all the farther you actually need to go, is verse 12 to find out who wrote it. It says, I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. Now, if he's the son of David and he's king over Israel in Jerusalem, who else would that be? Because Rehoboam, his son, if you remember, Rehoboam early on, like probably the week he came into office as king, Jeroboam and the group came to him and said, hey, reduce the taxes. And the wise man, the elder, said, don't keep the taxes up. Appease the people. Give them some leniency. And so then he went to his buddies, his friends, and they told him, keep the taxes higher. Tell them that your little finger, that's actually not what the word is, but your little finger is going to be thicker than your dad's waist, in how heavy it's going to be on the taxes. And of course, that split the kingdom in two. So Solomon was the only son of David who was the king of Israel in Jerusalem. After that, Jeroboam became king of Israel, and that's the history. But here's a guy who lived a lot. And it seems this book is written at the end of his life. That seems to be the most popular opinion of the book. And it would seem to be kind of one of those hindsight books. Some people say, well, Solomon departed from the Lord. That's kind of where, in First Kings and First Kings and First Chronicles, we're kind of left there. It almost seems like Solomon was not repentant as he died, and that's possible. But it kind of makes sense that he would have repented at the end of his life. Otherwise, it would be kind of weird that we would include Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon in the Bible if Ecclesiastes, which comes at the end of those or end of Proverbs, would kind of indicate that he probably repented of his sin. Of course, we know that Solomon went deep into sin, and this book, as these first couple chapters, kind of describe that, and kind of his reasoning behind that, I guess you could say. But it's my view that this book is his repentance and warning of, hey, I did all that, and so you guys don't need to do it. I tried everything. Just to let you know, it wasn't any fun, and so don't do it. So he identifies himself, and he identifies himself as a king, and that's kind of important because God gave some specific rules concerning kings in Israel. And if you remember, if you've read it before, Deuteronomy chapter 17, God gives them instruction. And of course, at that time, Israel didn't have a king. They had Moses, right? And then after that, they had Joshua, and then they had the judges. But God knew that there would be a day when they would have a king over them. And so he gave them these specific rules. In Deuteronomy 17, verse 16, he says, "But he, the king, shall not multiply horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. For the Lord has said to you, you shall not return that way again. Neither shall he multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself." And this is the same thing that brings down spiritual leaders today. The three things, what are they? The girls, the gold, and the glory. The three G's, right? I think, I don't remember if it was Billy Graham or somebody who came up with that. But it's the three G's, the girls, the glory, and the gold. You got to stay away from those things. And these are the same things. Why? Well, for the king, it would be about, multiplying horses would be about my might, right? And multiplying wives would be about my pleasure. And multiplying gold would be about my own provision. And of course, as believers in God, we want to get our not to glory in our own might, but to glory in the Lord, to trust in the Lord, and to get our pleasure, to get our fulfillment from the Lord. He's the only thing that can satisfy, and to get my provision from the Lord. And so when we secure ourselves on this earth and we have our own method and our own plan and our own way, we set ourselves up for failure in so many ways. Because as we're going to see, bad things can happen not just to bad people, but to anybody. And that's kind of one of the points of this. It says in 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 14, "The weight of the gold that came to Solomon yearly," and I don't think this is a coincidence, "was 666 talents of gold." Isn't that interesting? Moving on, just to kind of hit on these points, 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 26, "And Solomon gathered chariots and horsemen. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen, whom he stationed in the chariot cities with the king of Jerusalem. And the king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and he made cedar trees as abundant as the sycamores which are in the lowland." Okay, so you have him multiplying horses, you have him multiplying gold and silver, and then in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 5, it says, "For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Amorites. Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not fully follow the Lord, as did his father David. Then Solomon built high places for Chemosh, and the abomination of Moab, and the hill that is in the east of Jerusalem, and for Moloch, the abomination of the people of Ammon. And he did likewise for all his foreign wives who burned incense and sacrificed their gods. And so it would be his accumulation of all these things and the accumulation of his wives that would actually turn his heart away from the Lord. And so this book fundamentally asks, what's the point of life? And the question isn't actually asked, it's the answer that's given that tells you this is how Solomon feels about it. And that's in verse 2. The answer to the question, rather. It says in verse 2, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And so just by giving you the answer, he asks the question, what is worth anything? And he starts out just telling you everything is vanity. And the word in the Hebrew literally means vapor, or it could be translated smoke. And the idea seems to be that it seems to have substance, it seems to be something, but when you try to touch it or when you try to grasp it, it's just gone. Some preachers I've heard say it's like soap bubbles, right? You see a big bubble, it looks like something, but when you grab onto it, it's just gone. And that's kind of what he's saying. He's saying all things have illusion or the potential of trying to bring fulfillment to your life or satisfaction or meaning to your life, but it is a smoke screen. And that's what he's saying when he says everything is vanity. All the potential, all the things you're seeing, all that you're building, all that you're doing, and that's a pretty bleak perspective to have. But Solomon is purposely coming from that perspective of those who are under the sun. And that's what the title of this series is Under the Sun, as you saw on the graphic. I guess it's up there. As you see on the graphic, everything under the sun. And so there are those who are under the sun, which is, all of us here on the earth. But then there are also those who are in the S-O-N, the sun, right? And that's where we want to find ourselves. Ultimately, that is the solution. To escape the vanity and the meaninglessness of life and the temporal aspect of everything that we experience while we're on the earth. And so it's to find ourselves in a place where we really can find fulfillment. And so verse 3, it says, what profit has a man from all his labor which he toils under the sun. I need glasses. Do you have some? I'm going to have girly glasses if I do, though. They're probably all pearly or something. Man, this is what, I'm going to be 50 in just a few weeks, so that's what happens. My beautiful wife and her, look at those. Woo. I might need these, actually. Oh, goodness, there it is. Okay, what profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? One generation passes away and another generation comes, but the earth abides forever. So he's basically saying, I can't look at you with those on. He's basically saying that the earth keeps going after you die, and people are going to come and people are going to go, but the earth just keeps going. Now, he isn't saying that there won't be a new heaven and new earth, that these things are going to pass away. I had a Jehovah's Witness tell me that one time, and he's trying to use Ecclesiastes as his proof text. And you have to understand that Ecclesiastes, he's not trying to build like scientific doctrine, although there's a lot of scientific things in here that are accurate. He's not trying to say the earth's going to last forever. What he's saying is the earth continues to go on and on and on. He's giving the perspective of somebody who lives under the sun, and that's the farthest their perspective goes. Their perspective doesn't go beyond that. It's this life. Grab all you can. You just live once, right? YOLO, right? And that's kind of the idea that Solomon's trying to come from. But what he's saying is it's just going to keep on going. You're going to die, and it's going to keep on going. We're all part of that ultimate statistic. 10 out of 10 die, right? And if you think about that it is kind of morbid. It's not something we want to think about. It's not something that we want to meditate on. But think about this. Your great-grandparents, what were their parents' name? Do you know? There's 8 of them, if you didn't know. If you think of all your great-grandparents, there's 8 great-great-grandparents. And do you know all of their names? 8 sets, rather, actually. And you're lucky to know if you even know lived to long enough to know one of your great-grandparents, right? You probably knew your grandparents, but your great-grandparents, if you knew at least one of them, pretty blessed. I had a great-grandmother that I got to meet, but I didn't know any of the rest of my great-grandparents. They all passed away before I was old enough to know, I guess, or maybe even before I was born. I don't know. See, I just don't know. And so how long is it going to be until you're forgotten on the earth, right? I mean, unless you're Abraham Lincoln or George Washington or somebody like that, and people are writing biographies about you, then you'll be forgotten. You know, interestingly enough, my wife and I just finished The Watchmaker's Daughter. It's a autobiography, not autobiography, a biography of Corrie ten Boom. And it's instead of the 5-hour long, listen to The Hiding Place, it's like 22 hours long. And there's all these characters and all these people and all these extra things you didn't read about in The Hiding Place, just all the things that happened in between, and just so much stuff, but so many lives and so many people that you never know about had it not be that they're written in this book. And most of them you really don't know much about them anyway, just other than their name and a few things that they did. But that's what a life is. It's here and then it's gone, and it's passed on to the next generation, and the next generation forgets that generation, and there's not much left after that. And so that's the earthly perspective that we're looking at. It's not a super exciting one when you think about your life. Verse 5, it says, the sun also rises, and the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it arose. And these are the days of our lives, right? It's like the sun comes up and goes down, and it just keeps in that same cycle, keeps going. This is where it gets interesting. Verse 6, it says, the wind goes toward the south and turns around to the north, and the wind whirls around continually and comes again on its circuit. And you got to remember, this is before satellite photography or Doppler. We look at the weather from the sky, we see that it's a big swirl. But, if you didn't have that perspective, you would think that wind just blows straight, right? And yet, Solomon seemed to have this knowledge long before most people understood these things. And then he says this, verse 7, all the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. So he understands the hydro system of the earth. He understands the circulation of water and evaporation, that 1.5 billion cubic tons of rain fall every day on the earth. We got about half of that today here in Emmett. But he understands the weather patterns, and he understands that these things are just continual. And it's crazy. Well, it's not crazy, but it's funny to me, this whole idea of climate change. Well, duh, yeah, climate's always changing. It's constantly circulating. It's El Nino or El Nina, and it goes back and forth, and, one year it's this and one year it's that, and, weather patterns are always cycling, and people get so freaked out about it. I know a lot of you were here during snowpocalypse when everything went crazy. We had a ton of snow, and I think that this is how it works. The salesmen were telling everybody, we're going to have this for the next 5 years. Why? Because they bought so many snowplows. And so everybody went out and bought one, and then it didn't happen for, until this year, really. We didn't have a lot of snow. This is the most snow we've gotten since snowpocalypse, right? And but that's just the way it is. It's in cycles. I remember getting this much snow in 97 when we first moved to Emmett that year, or maybe it was the end of 96. I guess it was Christmas of 96. We first moved to Emmett. We came from Pocatello, where you pretty much just live in snow all year round. No, just kidding. It's probably on the roads, like it is here. It's on the roads for, a couple months at least, where you're driving on packed snow, especially on the side roads. We move here, it snows 7 inches on Christmas Day. I mean, it was snow. I remember that and everybody was all over the road. I was like, what is wrong with these people? They don't know how to drive on snow, but they don't get it that often, right? But things are just, they're constantly cycling. Things are changing, but then things just remain the same. He goes on, he says, verse 8, all things are full of labor. Man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. And I found that to be true in my life. There's always work to be done. I don't know how many times, I've lived in my house for 12 years now. I can't even remember how many times I've painted my fence. Maybe I just need to buy better paint. I don't know, but it's always having to be repaired. Things are always having to be recycled and fixed, and it's just ridiculous. I feel like we just got Albertsons out on the highway. It was probably, 2005? I don't know. The time goes so fast anymore. But they've remodeled that thing 3 times since they built it. It's just crazy to think about that. Like it's just things get worn out, and the eye is never satisfied with seeing. We want to see more. I don't know about you, but I kind of have a wanderlust. I love to go and visit and travel. My wife is not a big traveler, but I am. She likes to stay close to home. She gets that from her dad. I like to travel and see new places. I think I probably get that from my dad. But I want to see it. I want to lay my eyes on Mount Rushmore. I want to lay my eyes on the biggest ball of twine. I want to see the things in the world, and I want to hear. And she's more about that. I'm less about hearing. She's more about seeing. Somebody said, would you rather lose your eyes or your ears? I was like, my ears. They're already gone anyway. I'd rather lose my ears. And my wife said, I'd rather lose my eyes. Well, she's a musician, right? And so, it's a different perspective, but those things are never satisfied. I don't know how many times I've thought, what's my favorite song? And I just don't know. There's so many songs I like, and I can't tell you which one I like better than the other. But these things never are satisfied. Verse 9, it says, that which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. And we could argue that we have new things today. I mean, it seems like every day that something new is happening. I mean, look at these new Apple glasses that are coming out that are, they're the new VR glasses. We've probably all experimented with some AI stuff. I have an AI that I take my notes and I dump it into this AI, and it reads them back to me. And I swear, every once in a while, you hear her stop and drink a glass of water and breathe weird. It's just strange. It sounds so real. It's like, this is just too creepy. And I'm thinking to myself, like, she's not even that great of a reader, but it sounds real. Like she's just kind of, just an average person reading something. But there's that technology, and then there's avatars. There's this one AI, this program, you can throw your script into it, make an avatar of yourself. It looks real, and then it presents the material. It sounds like you. It's creepy. But those are the things that we can do today. We could say those things are new, airplanes, air technology and stuff. I mean, think about it. For millennia, things have been the same. I mean, a horse was the fastest transportation. I kind of looked this up because I wanted to see exactly how long it was. The horse was the fastest transportation that could carry probably a person until about 175 years ago, when steam engines, which started out at 10 miles an hour when they first were created, they started to get to about 40 miles an hour. Horse can maybe, at a max, a really fast horse can go about 39 miles an hour, I think the fastest clocked. So you got a 40-mile-an-hour train about 175 years ago. That's when things started to change with transportation. Think how fast we go now. We go 5 times the speed of sound. Maybe 8. I don't know how fast those planes are going these days. And not everybody gets to travel that fast, of course. But I mean, think about it. We can be from Los Angeles to New York in, 5-6 hours, something like that on a plane. That's crazy how fast we used to be. I heard a comedian say one time, you'd leave with one group of people, everybody would die on the way, and a whole new group of people would make it to California by the end of the time you got to the end of got to the end of the wagon train, and that's the way it used to be. A telegraph invented about 175 years ago as well. That was the change of how fast we could communicate. Back in the day, pigeon was the fastest way that you could think of communicating, other than maybe smoke signals, but you have to be kind of close, right? But now we communicate all the way around the world at the speed of light. And so we think, wow, things have really changed. These things are new. But here's an interesting question. What was technology like before the flood? And notice what he says in verse 10. He says, is there anything of which it may be said, see, this is new? It has already been in ancient times before us. What does that mean? Well, I don't know if you're interested in this type of stuff. Archaeology is a fascinating thing, but when you start to dig into some of the uncomfortable archaeology, like what they would call op arts or out-of-place artifacts, they find things like the London hammer. You know, in London, Texas, it's not London, England, but London, Texas, they found a hammer in a piece of rock, and it has some sort of wooden handle. It's a very nice, just modern-looking hammer, but it's made out of materials that we don't have the technology to build. In fact, it's not rusted, and it's encased in rock, supposedly millions and millions of years old, right? Yet a regular hammer with a handle. You have the Nampa doll found right here in Nampa, Idaho. They were digging a very deep well, and this doll came floating to the surface, and you know they don't know how it got there. This isn't something that's modern technology; it's something that's ancient technology that created this doll. The Baghdad battery. In Baghdad, they found several batteries that seemed to be used probably for what they believe probably was electroplating metal objects. The Dorchester pot, found in Dorchester, Massachusetts. It was in the middle of, I think it was encased in granite. As they were breaking the granite apart, they found a electroplated, very nice looking pot. And it looks like something you'd find in a thrift store. You know, it's like all intricately carved and everything. You can look, all you have to do is look up op arts, out of place artifacts. Egyptian hieroglyphics of helicopters. Have you seen these? You know, there's an Egyptian hieroglyphic that looks like an Apache helicopter. Whether it is or not, I don't know, but it's just weird. There's all these little airplanes that they found in Egypt, and then just the pyramids themselves around the world in the same, latitude, longitude. They find these pyramids all the way around, or the same longitude. Is that what it would be? Longitude. Around the world, they find this whole grouping of pyramids all the way around the world, and some of them are pretty amazing. In fact, the Great Pyramid, which the other pyramids are copies of, is absolutely perfect in its construction. The other ones are not. They're duplicates of the Great Pyramid. Great Pyramid doesn't seem to be a tomb like the other ones are. It seems to be for something else. Where do these things come from? Spark plugs they found in California. They found spark plugs encased in rock. What was technology like before the flood? What was it that caused God to destroy the whole earth? You know, of course, we talk about that as we go through Genesis, but what kind of technology did they have? Did they have AI? Did they have airplanes and all those things? We don't know. They were all destroyed by a great flood, and some small pieces of artifacts are left behind. Verse 11, it says, "There is no remembrance of the former things," so that's why we don't know, "nor will there be any remembrance of the things that are to come by those who will come after." So ancient things and people have been forgotten. The earth continues to rotate, and everything stays the same, and everything's pointless. And that's how we feel about politics today too, right? It's just the way that things are. It's just going to be a cycle of the same lies, the same activities, the same empires rising and falling. And so he says, verse 12, "I, the preacher, was king over Jerusalem." We talked about that. Solomon. Verse 13, "And I set my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven, this burdensome task God has given to the sons of man, by which they may be exercised." So Solomon set out with the burdensome task to search out wisdom. And of course, you remember in Kings 3, God asked Solomon, "What do you want?" You know, and Solomon said, "Give me wisdom to govern these great people of yours." He didn't ask for riches. He didn't ask for greatness. He didn't ask for anything else. He just asked for wisdom. And so God tells him, "I'm going to give you all of those things since you didn't ask for them, and I'm going to give you wisdom." And God poured it upon Solomon and made him the wisest man probably that ever lived. He was probably one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest person who ever lived. You know, when you think about just the pure wealth of Solomon, 666 talents of gold. 100 talents of gold, I think is, if I remember right, from the servant who the king forgave, 100 talents, it's over $1 billion. You know, you think of 100 talents of gold. 666 a year were coming into Solomon. And we're talking thousands and thousands of pounds of gold. And so probably, or most likely, the most wealthy man who's ever lived on the earth. Um, it says, verse 14, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity and grasping at the wind. And so translation of that, the sum of all that man can accomplish amounts to nothing. Wow. Doesn't that make you feel important? Make you feel productive? So he says, verse 15, what is crooked cannot be straightened, and what is lacking cannot be numbered. So they're talking about Washington, D.C., obviously. You know, and as an example, I mean, it's an obvious and easy target, you know, but think about it. What would it really take to straighten out Washington, all that's wrong within Washington? Whether it's, you know, as one side might say, protecting democracy, or the other side might say draining the swamp. You know, what would it take to fix the problems? To not just balance the budget, but actually to clear up the national debt. What would it take to do that? I mean, think about it. I mean, we have these bills that pass, these super PACs that pass, and they have all this crazy stuff in them, and everybody there eventually just agrees. Okay, let's pass it, and let's continue to spend, let's continue to do this. But what would it take to really have substantive change in just our government? Not to mention all the other governments of the world, which are just as corrupt or just as messed up or just as going in the wrong direction. Far more than just the right guy in office, you know, to fix all of those problems, right? You know, we go through a 4-year election cycle and we hope for the best, and you know, and we wonder, you know, are there 2 normal people in this country that could run for president? You know, it's just 2. yeah, you guys, Tracy and Lisa, for president. But seriously, you know, and it just seems crazy, like the things that we see within our world. And the problems are cyclical. You know, as they say, this is a great axiom, and it's so true. Strong men make good times make weak men make for bad times, and bad times make for strong men. Right? The depressing part of that phrase is the cycle we're on. Weak men making bad times, and I think we're heading into that cycle, and that's the difficult thing to think about when we think about those things. But he's saying, you know, what's crooked cannot be made straight, and what's lacking cannot be numbered. Well, wait a minute. No, we've seen things improve. We've seen some crooked things straightened out, right? Only to go back to crooked again. And that's what he's saying. He's saying that you can work and work and work to fix something. You know, you see that in your house. You fix your house, get it completely remodeled. My house was completely remodeled in 1996. Now you can imagine, you can just think about it and you know exactly what my house looks like, right? the style and everything. And it's been remodeled several times and fixed and painted, and pipes have been replaced, and things have been changed over the years, because things just continue to fall apart. And that's just the way that things are, the law of entropy and all of that. Second law of thermodynamics. Verse 16, it says, I communed with my heart, saying, look, I have attained greatness and have gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge. So Solomon had people from all over the world, because of his wisdom, coming just to hear, and not just to hear, but to observe a kingdom that's been run by the wisdom, just the wisdom of God. You know, and I don't know about you, but if you look at like just even tools that we had for like kitchen tools, just think of that. Kitchen tools that we had back in the 70s, you know, and you know, you're just looking for a laceration using some of those things, man. They're just like, some of those are they're just deadly, you know, the way that they're designed. And you know, and nowadays we see a lot more things that are ergonomically made, and you just know, like, there's quality stuff out there that's really well thought out and designed and manufactured, and then you have stuff that's just junk, right? And that's what people would see when they'd come to see Solomon's kingdom, that the whole thing was not, it wasn't just that Solomon was a smart guy sitting on a throne with a kingdom falling apart, but his wisdom was infiltrating and infecting every part of his kingdom. And the whole thing was running smoothly. We'll be talking about in a minute. Verse 17 it says, "And I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this is also grasping for the wind." And so when he exhausted his wisdom, he moved on to foolishness. And really what his pursuit was is not what's the wisest thing or the wisest way to live. What he's looking for is what makes a man or a heart satisfied. Is it gaining knowledge and building great things? Is it making things wonderful? Or is it party, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die? Which is going to make for a better life, a happier life? And that's what his pursuit was for. He says, "For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases in knowledge increases in sorrow." Now, I'm not going to say that there's not a great benefit in education, but you ever find yourself learning too much? Just a little search when you have a weird pain in your body and you go to WebMD and you start to learn about all the things that you could possibly have, it brings a lot of anxiety and sorrow. No, that's a horrible example, but isn't it true that the more you know, the more you understand politics, the more you understand any field really, the more troubling things come up. It's almost like there's simplicity in not knowing, and the more you know, the more burdened you become by the knowledge that you have. And part of the burden that you have by the knowledge that you have is that you, as you learn, you also realize there's so much more that I don't know. In fact, the learning it's exponentially opens up Pandora's box of all the things that I need to know, or I feel like I need to know, and I've learned all of this, but there's so much unexplored, and all those things could be dangerous to not know. And so that it just puts a burden upon the person as they increase in sorrow. That's why people say ignorance is bliss. And there is some truth to that, but we're going to talk about that in a moment as well. But knowing too much can weigh on you. And I remember actually hearing Don McClure one time. He said that he got saved. He was a brand new Christian. He was super excited, going to Calvary Chapel. And then he went to Bible college. I think he went to Biola or something like that. It was a good Bible college. And the guy says, "Hey, how are you doing, Don?" He says, "When I first got saved, I was happy, but now I know," and he listed up all of his theological positions. He says, "Now I know all these things, and he says, "and now I'm miserable." And that can produce that at times. In verse 1 it says, chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with myrrh, therefore enjoy pleasure, but surely this also was vanity." So in learning and wisdom and partying and pleasure, there was still no satisfaction. And I'm sure that if you've lived long enough, you have seen that yourself. You try to earn a lot for yourself or try to do a lot for yourself and gain wisdom and knowledge, and that doesn't quite fill the void inside of you. Or so you go and you party and you hang out with people and you do a little bit of drugs and you sleep around a little bit and you have those experiences, and still you feel empty. In fact, maybe a little bit more empty, because now you feel like you've done something to harm other people even in all of that. He says, verse 2, "I said of laughter, madness, and of myrrh, what does it accomplish?" And of course, myrrh is enjoyment of things. And it's an empty life when we're living for what's under the sun. I've said this a million times, and I'm sure you've all heard me say this, but one of the most profound experiences I had in my life was after God had given me a ton of things that I'd been praying for, like 4 things specifically. God had answered 4 specific prayers, and we just had everything we could possibly need. And I remember feeling so empty and so depressed inside, and getting up out of the bed that the Lord had given us. We prayed for specifically for bed. Walking past my son, who was a miracle child, we prayed for him. and walking through the house that the Lord had given us, looking out in the carport or the car that the Lord had given us, and we prayed specifically, and in very short order, the Lord had given us all these things, and feeling so dark and depressed and empty inside, and getting on my knees and just saying, God, why do I feel so depressed? And the Lord spoke to my heart very clearly, and it's the same message, and that is, Mike, you can't enjoy anything until you enjoy me first. And I learned that, like, I can enjoy everything. And I know that when I start to feel burdened by my marriage or by my children or by my house or by, my job, that it's not telling me that I need a new job or need a new kids or need a new wife. That's not it at all. In fact, that would just add sorrow and pain to my life. What it's telling me is that I need to be closer to Jesus. Because everything under the sun is going to disappoint us. No matter what it is, it's going to weigh on us. It's going to wreck us. But it's Jesus, it's over the sun is where we find our fulfillment, where we find our life, where we find our pleasure, where we find our riches, where we find our provision, and where we find our pleasure. Rather than the gold, the glory, and the girls, right? So he's going after the gold, the glory, and the girls now in this phase of his life. Verse 3 says, I searched in my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what is good for the sons of men to do under heaven all the days of their lives. And so there we go, like the sounds through the hourglass, right? So in his folly, getting drunk, being filled with pleasure, he was ever the scientist. He did these things under a microscope. As he's, doing stupid stuff, he's like, okay, was that better or was that better? It's like the optometrist. Was that better or is that better? Was that better or is that better? Which did I like better? Was that worth it? And comparing it with prudence, comparing it with gaining wisdom. Is this something that's better, for the sons of men? I mean, you're all going to die anyway. Might as well know what is going to get the most out of life. And trying to determine what's best for a person to live out. Verse 4, he says, I made my works great. I built myself houses and planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards. I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. So he tries folly, and now he's trying hobbies. And he's working on things. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. I acquired male and female servants and had servants born in my houses. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. And so hobbies, and now he's building, his personal empire and setting everything up for himself. And he applied his wisdom to setting up his place, the best arrangements for his living. And people do this. I've done this, and we've witnessed this. Actually, there is somebody who gave a witness to what Solomon was doing, and that's in 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 1. It says, now, when the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to test him with hard questions. So, Queen of Sheba here is a super wise man, and she's probably thinking, like a Buddhist monk sitting on a, lotus leaf up there in Jerusalem, and I'm going to go see what he has to say. And he's probably, wearing some weird clothes and, looking off into space or shaking back and forth. She's seen all that stuff before. But she comes to Jerusalem and she sees something completely unexpected. She sees a well put together, wise man who seems to be living life, obviously living life to the fullest. And it says this in verse 4, and when the queen of Sheba had seen all the wisdom of Solomon, notice this, the house that he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his servants, the service of his waiters and their apparel, his cupbearers, and his entryway by which he went up to the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. In other words, it took her breath away. She was like, of course. Like, this makes so much sense. Everything he did was so perfect and in order and beautiful and seamless. There was no waste in movement. There was no waste in the amount of servants or the portions of food, everything. There was nothing extravagant, but there was nothing meager. It was just perfect. Everything was done according to wisdom. I worked at Wendy's when I was a teenager. And as much as that job was not great and nothing new under the sun, it did not bring satisfaction to the soul. But you saw a lot of wisdom in the way that they ran their business. They made their burgers. They had all these burgers on the frying pan. And when those burgers got too cooked, they threw them up in this little thing that was for just full of water, and it's sitting on this crate, and they were being steamed. And then later, you take those and put them in a bag and put them in the freezer. And they take those bags and they microwave them, and they put them out and they chop them up and put them into the chili. And so there's no waste in any of that. Like there's no crusty burger getting thrown away. And then as you put your burgers together, it was red, green, white. You had these color codes, and you knew exactly what you were doing for each burger. And you did mayonnaise, ketchup, mustard, lettuce, and it was all the things in a row. And we had a 30-second window time. Like somebody come to the driveway, and if we were over 30 seconds, we'd failed. From the time they ordered and started driving until the time they got their food, it had to be 30 seconds. I don't think Wendy's goes by that anymore. But back in those days, it was a well-oiled machine. Still awful to work there, but it was a well-oiled machine. And that's the kind of thing that she's seen as she's seen all the stuff going on there. Her spirit was taken from her. Verse 6. Then she said to the king, "It was a true report which I heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom. However, I did not believe the words until I came and saw with my own eyes, and indeed the half of it was not told me, which your wisdom and prosperity exceeded the fame which I heard." And so this is what she's saying, is that it didn't matter what she was told about just the words of wisdom he had. Everything about his kingdom was put together with wisdom. Every action, everything that was going on there. I went through a phase, and actually still maybe a little bit going through this phase, but with Amazon Alexas, those Echo things in my house, and, trying to get lights set up and things like that. And, and it just seems super wise, turn on living room lights, or, turn on this or turn on that, and it just works so great until it doesn't. And those things break down too, don't they? By the time you can afford to buy a couple lights and everything, the Echo is broken, and you need to replace that. And it's like, it's never going to be perfect, right? And that's just the way that it works. I think my Alexa gets dumber with age. You ask it questions, and it doesn't even seem to understand plain English anymore. I don't know. I was amazed by it at the beginning. Not anymore. Verse 8. I also gathered for myself silver and gold, and the special treasures of the kings and the provinces. I acquired male and female singers, and the delights of the sons of men, and the musical instruments of all kinds. So we had the latest sound system, the coolest gadgets, most exotic pets, all the things that a person could want. All these people coming in to sing for him, to bring Mary, and it's nice to be able to have good music, right? But sometimes that wears on you too. One thing I noticed in my house is if we're playing any type of music, it doesn't matter if it's classical music, and you get 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 kids talking, all of a sudden you want that music off faster than you can say, "Alexa, shut up." It's just one of those things. It can be overwhelming. It says in 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 22, "For the king had merchant ships at sea with the fleet of Hiram. Once every 3 years, the merchant ships came, bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and monkeys. So King Solomon surpassed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom." He had peacocks, he had monkeys, he had all these different things, all gold and silver. He was just collecting every exotic thing he could possibly have, everything he could possibly own, and that's what he thought would make him happy. So it says, verse 9, "So I became great and excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me." So it wasn't just wisdom and riches and luxury and good times, it was fame. He was renowned throughout the world for all the things that he had done, yet he allowed himself to be a fool and to do all the research to find out what is going to make a person happy under the sun. What could possibly do it? Verse 10, "Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward from all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. So if you can imagine that if you had the ability to create as much wealth as you could possibly create, to gain as much fame as you could possibly have. I was, sorry, that was Ecclesiastes 2:10 through 11. Oh, yeah, that's different. That's 10:11. See, I missed the 2 when I put it in there, sorry. Yeah, don't. That's a spoiler alert. Now get that off the screen. Putrefied flies. We're not there yet. Anyway, you're following along in their Bibles. And so he had everything he could possibly want, and yet still not finding pleasure in that. It actually says this in 1 Kings chapter 11 verse 1. Are we there? You got that one? 1 Kings 11:1. Okay, First Kings 11:1. It says, "But King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Amorites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, from the nations of whom the Lord had said to the children of Israel." And this is interesting because, not only did he multiply chariots and horses and gold, like the Lord told him no, but the Lord says, "You shall not intermarry with them, nor they with you. Surely they will turn away your heart after their gods." Solomon clung to these in love. So he didn't withhold from himself any pleasure. He found pleasure in all of these foreign women. In verse 3 it says, "Then he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart." This guy had some serious problems. Serious problems. And so he multiplied all of this, and he didn't, anything, like what did it say there? Of course, Lau couldn't put it up. He said, "Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them." You think about that. What would your life look like if every desire of your heart, whether wicked or pure, you acted on? What would it be like if you said everything that came to mind? If every sexual pleasure that you had that just popped up into your head, you acted on? What would your life look like? You'd be in prison, right? Solomon was the king, and he was wise, so he could work it. He knew how to manipulate to get everything that he wanted and in the way that he wanted, and yet it turned away his heart from God. He didn't find any profit in it. In other words, he didn't find satisfaction, because satisfaction in all of those things is fleeting. All the things that, and it's probably just the enemy, but all the things that the world and the enemy and the flesh are telling us, this will make you happy, this will satisfy. If you just had this, you'd be better off. And we chase after those things, maybe on a small level or maybe on a large level. But we chase after those things, and most people don't have the capacity or the means to fulfill all their crazy desires in life. But Solomon did, and so he's there to say to you and to me, hey, been there, done that. And guess what? And so verse 12 it says, "Then I turned myself to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who succeeds the king? Only what has already been done." It's kind of difficult to understand in the New King James. But basically, at the end of his life, he ends this experiment and assesses all the data and compares it to all the things that he's lived for, all the things that he's done. And he literally is asking, who could be better than me, the king, to make this determination? The wisest man in the world. Who could be better to come to a conclusion about what's going to make you happy? Satisfaction in folly, or satisfaction in gaining wisdom, or satisfaction in gaining possessions, or satisfaction in gaining fame, or satisfaction in gaining power? What's going to make us happiest? And I think we'll be surprised at the answer. Verse 13, he says, "Then I saw that wisdom excels folly, as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I myself perceived that the same event happens to them all. So he's saying living life as a wise and prudent person is definitely a better experience. When he did that, when he did smart things and noble things and beautiful things, it was definitely better than when he did stupid and nasty things. That's going to give you a better life experience. A person who's living to try to be a good citizen and to try to build something beautiful and have a nice, beautiful house and all those things, that is definitely better than the person who's shooting up heroin or the person who's drunk every weekend or whatever, living for parties. Out of the two, the person living that life is going to be more fulfilled. But both can get cancer. It's indiscriminate. Both can experience war. Both can have accidents. Both could live until their 90s. Both could be running for president. Right? I mean, it doesn't matter. It's indiscriminate. Like the wealthiest, smartest, wisest person in the world could die young because his country's attacked and he's killed by a stray bullet. And the fool could live to his 90s. It's indiscriminate. Life is hard, and everybody dies. Verse 15, he says, "So I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, this is also vanity, emptiness." Verse 16, for there is no remembrance of the wise, there is no more remembrance of the wise. Better put these glasses back on. Oh, there we go. There is no more remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever, since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As a fool. The same way. It's kind of depressing. Now, I mean, technically a wise man doesn't die by saying, hey, watch this, or hold my beer, something like that, usually. But it's depressing living under the sun. That's the reality of it. Verse 17, therefore I hated life, because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me, for all is vanity and grasping at the wind. I think it was the famous atheist Voltaire said, I hate life, but I'm afraid to die. I hate life, but I'm afraid to die. And that's pretty much the reality of everyone who doesn't have the Lord. Then I hated my labor, he says, verse 18, which I toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool, yet he will rule over all my labor which I toiled, and in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. And he kind of repeats the same thing. Verse 20, he says, therefore I turned my heart and despaired of all the labor in which I had toiled under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, yet he must leave his heritage to a man who has not labored for it. This is also vanity and a great evil. Now think about that. You work hard. You work your way up from the gutter. You build an empire. You leave it to your son who's a bonehead, right? And he's spoiled and he's grown up with a silver spoon, never known the poverty and the difficulty or the effort and the cost it costs you to get to where you are, and he just takes it and he squanders it. And that's exactly what would happen to Solomon. We know exactly what would happen to Solomon's his kingdom and empire. Rehoboam, who was a spoiled, rotten brat, in 1 week gets his kingdom split in two. And 10 tribes leave his kingdom. That's pretty bad when you have 12 tribes and 10 leave, right? And that's what happens. I think about this in ministry too, what we have here. And we could build a building, and God can do great things through that. And we know if we do that, he's going to do great things for us. But then, 20 years go by, I retire. Maybe that guy stays for a little while, and maybe he does great, or maybe he doesn't. And then another guy takes the church, and then next thing they're selling off the building to a shopping center or something like that, I mean that's just the way that things go. And I think that that's why we have to realize that that's not what we're living for. I'm not living to make my name great or to do something great to be remembered. We're doing something different completely. Verse 22, it says, "For what has man for all his labor, and for the striving of his heart with which he has toiled under the sun? For all his days are sorrowful, and his work burdensome. Even in the night his heart takes no rest. This is also vanity. Nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand," oh, here's something we haven't heard yet, "from the hand of God." And so we see a turn now, something different, a glimmer of hope. What Solomon is saying is that it's the hand of God that makes us understand that nothing under the sun can satisfy us. And that if we live for our work, we're going to lose sleep, we're going to be frustrated. If we live for anything else, we're going to lose sleep and be frustrated because we're just going to toil and toil, and things are going to fall apart. And sometimes things will go our way, but oftentimes they won't. And at the end, a couple generations, nobody's going to care. And so to think in terms of this earth only leads us to despair, but to take pleasure in our labor and in a proximate way, in that this is going to affect me and my immediate family and maybe my kids after me, and enjoy that, and to realize it's all going to burn. Someday it's all going to burn. We say that as Christians, don't we? Somebody scratches our new car, that's okay, it's going to burn, right? We're mad for a second, but then we remember it's all going to burn. And it makes you wonder, is there more under the sun? And that's when we find ourselves in the sun. Notice what he says in verse 25. "For who can eat, or who can have enjoyment more than I?" He's the king, right? He's the wisest man. Notice this. "For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to man who is good in his sight. But to the sinner he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind." And so the conclusion he gives to this chapter is that the only good we can experience is the joy that comes from God in the things that we do. That's the only good that we can experience under the sun.